The story you are about to hear is one shrouded in mystery, whispered through the ages. While 3 wise men followed the star to Bethlehem, there was another, a 4th wise man. His story, though untold in Scripture, is a tale of faith, doubt, and sacrifice that reveals the heart of humanity's struggle to find God. In the ancient city of Ecbatana, nestled among the jagged peaks of Persia, there lived a man named Artaban. Unlike his fellow Magi, Melchior, Gaspar, and Balthazar, Artaban was not born into wealth or privilege. He was a self-made scholar, spending his life studying the stars, ancient scrolls, and the prophecies of a coming king. One fateful night, while gazing into the heavens, Artaban noticed a peculiar light, a new star, blazing brighter than any he had ever seen. He quickly consulted the ancient texts and realized it was the sign foretold, the birth of a great king, one who would bring salvation to all. The next morning, Artaban sold everything he owned and purchased 3 gifts for the newborn king, a sapphire of the deepest blue, a ruby that gleamed like fire, and a pearl as pure as the first snowfall. With these treasures, he prepared to join his fellow Magi, who were gathering to embark on the journey to Bethlehem. Artaban set out on his fastest steed, racing across deserts and mountains to meet the other Magi. However, as he traversed a desolate stretch of road, he came across a dying man, collapsed in the sand. The man's lips were cracked, and his eyes pleaded for help. Artaban hesitated. If he stopped, he would miss the rendezvous with the Magi, and the king might be lost to him forever. Yet his heart would not let him pass by. He dismounted, gave the man water, bound his wounds, and stayed with him until he recovered. By the time Artaban reached the meeting point, the other Magi had already gone. Determined, he pressed on alone, following the stars that seemed to beckon him toward Bethlehem. After weeks of treacherous travel, Artaban finally reached Bethlehem. But the streets were eerily silent. He inquired about the child, and a woman pointed him to a small house. Inside, a young mother cradled her baby. "Is this the king?" Artaban asked, presenting the sapphire. The woman shook her head. "No, but he was here." The family fled to Egypt to escape the soldiers. Before Artaban could respond, the sound of soldiers' boots filled the air. The woman's face turned pale as the soldiers began raiding homes, slaughtering every male child under 2 years old. Artaban stood in the doorway, blocking the soldiers' entry. "Take this," he said, handing them the sapphire. "Spare this child." The captain eyed the jewel, nodded, and ordered his men to move on. The woman wept with gratitude, but Artaban felt a pang of despair. One of his gifts for the king was gone. For decades, Artaban wandered the ancient world, following every whisper and rumor about the King of Kings. He traveled to Egypt, seeking the child in the bustling streets of Alexandria. He journeyed to the distant lands of Parthia and Syria, always arriving too late or finding no trace. Along the way, he gave freely of what he had. He used the ruby to ransom a young girl from slavery, and he spent years serving the poor and downtrodden. Yet his heart grew heavy with the thought that he had failed his divine mission. When Artaban was old and frail, he heard a rumor that the king he had sought all his life was in Jerusalem. Hope reignited in his heart, and he set out once more, though his steps were slow and his body weary. It was Passover, and the city was teeming with people. Artaban arrived to find a crowd gathered on a hill outside the city. At the center was a man hanging on a cross, crowned with thorns. A sign above him read, "King of the Jews." Artaban's heart broke. Have I come so far, only to find him dying? As he stood there, clutching the pearl, his last gift, a commotion erupted nearby. A group of soldiers was dragging a young woman through the streets. She cried out, "Please, save me." I am to be sold into slavery to pay my family's debts. Artaban looked at the pearl, the only treasure he had left. With tears streaming down his face, he gave it to the soldiers in exchange for her freedom. At that moment, the sky darkened, and the ground shook violently. Artaban was struck by a falling stone and collapsed. As Artaban lay dying, he whispered, "Lord, I have failed you. I have no gift to give." A voice, gentle and full of light, spoke to him. "You have given me everything, Artaban. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was in chains, you set me free. Whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me." Artaban's heart filled with peace as the light enveloped him. He had found the king at last, not in a palace, but in every act of love he had shown along the way. And so, the fourth wise man's journey ended, not in failure, but in the ultimate fulfillment of his mission. Artaban's story reminds us that seeking God often leads us down unexpected paths. It is not the treasures we bring, but the love we give that truly honors the King.